There's been a thing on the internet for a while, since Knights of the Old Republic released, the video game I mean, not the comic run, about skipping Taris. And I've always thought, if you like the game, why are you skipping a whole big section of it? So, the other day, a video popped up in my recommended. I don't know this channel. It's called Loading Screen. But it says, why Taris is genius. Obviously spoilers for Knights of the Old Republic in this. So I'm going to take a look, see what it seems like. It's a woman speaking. See what she says. It's an hour long. We'll see if it has a lot of merit to it, if it's dragging a lot, if there's stuff that I'm not finding interesting, then I'll probably leave it. But we'll see how it goes, because I haven't seen this before. Of course, animated violence, mature themes. Just what we like. And oh, it's only 720p. That doesn't matter. So we'll see what it's.
You probably know how the story goes. You awake in the barracks of a ship you don't remember boarding, and a man you've never met rushes in to loudly tell you that the ship you're on, the Endar Spire, is under attack. Cool ship name, by the way. The loud man tells you that you now must lay down your life to protect some Jedi on board, having apparently sworn an oath to do so. This Jedi has a special power and is thus the last hope for the Republic in their battle against the Sith, led by Darth Malak, who wants to take over the galaxy. You and the loud man fight through some attacking Sith soldiers, for the Republic! Only to find much of the ship devastated, and most of the crew have already utilized the escape pods, including that Jedi probably. As you attempt to escape the ship before it's destroyed, a dark Jedi attacks, and the loud man nobly vows to hold him off. I'll try to hold him off so you can get away. You find that yourself and the ship's captain, Carthanassi,
Rest in peace, Trask Olgo.
A man with an unusual yet captivating cadence of the last remaining survivors of the Endar Spire. He suggests you escape to the planet below.
We can hide out on the planet below.
So the final escape pod is propelled from the Endar Spire just as it disintegrates into nothing. And that's how you end up on Taris. And people hate Taris. Welcome to a loading screen. My name is Kiva, and I'm here to drastically overthink the first level in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, also known as KotOR. This game...
Yep, that makes sense. It's an hour long. She would be drastically overthinking it for that. But let's see what she says. Because I've never felt like I really want to skip Taris. Like, I have felt like, damn, when I did my KotOR playthrough, it's taken a long time to play through Taris, how I was doing it. But I've never felt like I want to skip it. Now, maybe that's just me. Of like, if I'm playing the game, I play all of it. I'm not taking shortcuts.
Was a huge deal. It's a historic RPG, widely praised for its immersive and affecting story. Players are able to create a character and go on a space opera adventure set 4,000 years prior the era of the Star Wars movies. And the vibes are set immediately for a grand adventure. The character creation screen is dramatic and scored by the game's grand, tense main theme.
Yeah. Also, this was 2 months ago that this came out. I just thought to mention.
Once created, our character gets immediately embroiled in a conflict known as the Jedi Civil War. The iconic Star Wars scrolling text fills us in on some necessary details. There were 2 Sith Lords, Revan and Malak. Now there's just Malak left, and he's causing problems.
It's 4,000 years
Jedi
before.
And military forces referred to as the Sith are attempting to take over the galaxy, and it's up to the character you create to stop them, or join them.
This is but a taste of the dark side.
Sounds like a cool premise for a game, right? We're totally primed for a big dramatic space adventure. But then... This space opera adventure starts the player off as a non-Jedi nobody on a tiny obscure planet called Taris. This, sure isn't following up on the tension set by the opening of the game, which isn't...
Which, I mean, it makes sense, right? I think it's like a lot more old school RPGs where they start you off at level 1, you're low level, you're not doing a huge amount, and then you build up to those epic moments, rather than the new style of like Baldur's Gate 3 opens up, oh, epic, and oh, you're part of this epic thing. Starts you off small, and then as you level up, the experience is like the tabletop RPG as well, theoretically, is that the events scale up as the player levels up.
Interesting choice in terms of pacing and narrative, isn't it? The fans of the game have dubbed Taris a tutorial planet, a frustrating waste of time with a drastic lack of shiny laser sword activities. When you create your character and get into KotOR, you don't start off as a Jedi. And yes, if you're getting into KotOR because you want a cool Jedi RPG adventure, wandering around a planet-wide metropolis for hours without being able to force lightning anybody is going to be a bit of a rude shock. No pun intended. I'm not unsympathetic to the fact that the game kind of subverts on its promise made in the dramatic introduction. If you think Taris is a drag, I am not here to drag you. It's a valid take. There's an entire Steam thread titled Taris is lame. There are countless Reddit threads dragging Taris. A personal favourite of mine is one called, Does KotOR 1 get better after Taris? And the top reply is just, yes. Yes, it does. To be fair, there are some...
Yeah, I get it feeling like it drags, but upon replaying it, it's like, yeah, it's only, I think, because people replay it so much that they feel like it drags more, especially like after the first playthrough, when you play through Taris again. It's like, you already know all the stuff. You don't need to sit through it again, type thing.
Taris defenders in that.
But if you wait long enough, then play it again, I think there's less of that effect.
Thread, so I know I'm not alone out here. Even though I'm about to argue that Taris is secretly genius, even I do understand installing the mod to skip Taris entirely, especially if you're replaying the game for the 11th time. When you're playing KotOR,
Oh, my normal stream thing alarm's gone off. Yeah, there's a whole ass mod just to skip Taris.
it feels like there's Taris, and then there's the rest of the game. And the rest of the game is when you get to level up to a Jedi and start being a galactic hero and stuff. I understand the segmentation of Taris and the game proper as a valid criticism. From a critical perspective, perhaps there's an issue with narrative cohesion, a lack of harmony between the game's different parts. But what if, as a thought experiment, we tried looking at Taris from an alternative perspective? Thought experiments Taris, if you will.
Alright.
What can we find if we ask, what's the narrative purpose of Taris? Mechanically, Taris's designation as a tutorial planet makes a sort of functional sense. The gameplay scenarios set on Taris teach players about the mechanics, how to use items like energy shields, that party members periodically have dialogue trees to explore, that our morals...
Something's bothering Carth,
to
yes.
the light or dark side of the Force.
Giving me 100 credits? You're giving him 100 credits?
Taris is mechanically an environment in which the player slowly climbs the learning curve of the game, and many players don't find that very exciting. But what does Taris look like if we focus on the narrative instead? Perhaps even at the exclusion of analysing the mechanics if we're going to get daring. This discussion does necessitate spoiling all of Taris straight up, but I'll give specific warnings before I mention any late game KotOR spoilers.
Yeah, so obviously she's going to talk about it a lot, so there's spoilers. Duh.
Because this game has been out for 21 years, but you bet we still care about spoilers for this one. I've also written into the script any necessary backstory stuff to foreground my discussion of Taris, so you don't have to go and do a whole replay just to figure out what the heck I'm on about. But
Yeah, do zone out if you don't know the biggest twist in KotOR, especially. That big reveal is well worth not spoiling and then playing yourself. It's a great experience.
just in case you haven't played KotOR and you somehow end up on this video, please keep an ear out for the late game spoiler warning. But I'm pretty sure anyone who decides to give this video a go has probably played it already, probably knows what happens, probably dislikes Taris, and probably has even seen other video essays about KotOR. So, my central goal here is to offer up my weird take on Taris to the KotOR.
I haven't seen many other videos, of course. I don't go looking for them a whole heap, do I?
Enjoyers out there.
Oh, that's a rhetorical question. I don't really go looking for video essays on the games that I've played. Generally speaking.
My take, outlandish as it may seem, is that I think narratively the entire game rests on the shoulders of Taris. I know it's a weird take.
They feel your methods, your theories are
Spooky. Do you think I'm spooky?
But I think Taris is essential. Without Taris, the narrative falls apart. Admittedly, that's a slight exaggeration, but I have been mentally cataloguing complaints about Taris since 2003 when I was a kid and I tried to play KotOR for the first time and I thought it was the coolest thing ever, and after some serious, reflective and analytical thought, I've decided I was right all along. Taris is great. Well, don't take that too literally.
From what I hear, the wealthy live on the tops of all the tall towers, and if you're poor, you live down in the shadows. And it gets worse the lower you go.
Taris has a lot of issues as a society, but the Taris portion of the game really serves the narrative. Plus, it's purple.
Look, and it's purple!
I mean, technically, it's the light reflected from the sun-kissed coral pink clouds of the perpetually twilight sky that warms the metallic shale blues of the world's planet-wide metropolis into shady lilacs. I won't say I studied art, but there will be signs. But Taris is more than pretty. It's more than the tall towers and the soft-horn soundtrack singing
The lore!
concealing the dark depths of suffering deep under the planet's skin. Taris is dodging Sith soldiers and bounty hunters. It's passing time playing Pazak in the cantinas. It's competing in the duel arena.
Draw your eyes to the center ring. With
We have a very special presentation in
Store for you. I love that announcer.
Fraught history and stratified society. Taris, if you can believe it, manages to introduce major lore, set up major thematic ideas for the game, draws us into the story world without relying on the major films, establishes and raises narrative stakes for the game, and positions the player as an underdog to create great contrast as you level up through the game into a powerful Jedi. Taris is putting in overtime in the narrative department, but is getting paid at the tutorial world rate. Taris is genius, and here's why. Let's talk about cognitive narratology, because at some point this little May the 4th themed video essay spiraled way out of control. Narratology is the study of narratives. Cognitive narratology is a subset of that study that focuses on the cognitive experience of narratives, and elements of narratives that shape the experience. While narratology looks at...
Well, the terminology is new to me. The concept there is... Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, it's studying how you react to it and what the experience is from your mind rather than the actual narrative structures and whatever.
On the cognitive experience of narratives and elements of narratives that shape the experience. While narratology looks at how stories work in a material sense, as in how the words, segments, themes, ideas work on the page or screen, cognitive narratology shifts that focus to what's happening in the mind as it interacts with the story and its elements. Cognitive narratology.
So it's like a bit more psychology too.
Narratology lists narratology, linguistics, semiotics, computer science, philosophy, psychology, and other domains. Cognitive narratology, thus, is pretty broad, but it can also focus down to the minutiae.
The way she's displaying things is mostly on the right, so I'm going to shift over.
Of narratives, the small details that make stories come to life in our minds. In the Living Handbook of Narratology, scholar Herman suggests that cognitive narratology concerns itself with questions about how narratives are organized in order to make sense to audiences, how narratives can enable audiences to consider and empathize with a vast array of experiences, perspectives, how we understand characters, and what happens in the brain for us to understand stories. The things that narratives do affect our cognitive experience of the narrative, but the question is how. And the question is also, what does this have to do with KotOR? But bear with me, I'll get there. I have a theory.
Got a theory. It could be Barney's.
That Taris is instrumental in shaping the cognitive experience of the story of KotOR as a whole. I'm going to attempt to do a reading of Taris through a cognitive narratological lens. Now, this would be academically contentious because I can't really do that in a formal empirical way. I'll be doing a reading of the text, the events on Taris, with brief discussion of what happens in the late game that pays close attention to the concepts that are brought up by the game, and my subjective perspective on the kinds of thoughts and reactions I think the game is intending to create in players. The only way I could imagine doing this kind of analysis in a formal academic way is to survey a whole bunch of people about how they perceive and experience the different elements of the game, and then ask how they feel when they skip Taris, and get some people to play the game who have never played it before, but give them a version of the game where the skip Taris mod is already installed, and then ask them at the end of the game how they feel about the whole thing, and then collate all this data. But I don't have the resources to do that, plus it sounds like a lot of math, and I don't like math. So
that's a lot of work if you're actually just trying to prove that you shouldn't skip Taris.
I'm going to take what people...
But I feel like the concept of that it sets up things and it's important to understand the plot and the greater things and it ties into later game stuff, that can apply to a lot of things of like if someone's saying, oh, read this book series, but no, skip one of the books. Or a good example is TV shows and things of like, oh, skip this part, you don't want that part. I'm like, no. I want to see all of it and then form my opinion, especially if you like watch the start of a TV show or something and then want to like it has actually hooked you in and then you want to experience all of it in that way of like, I don't know why some people skip things. I get it if you read it and then go, no, I'm never going to reread that again, or I'm never going to watch that again because it wasn't that good, but at least give it a chance.
Have written on Reddit as a kind of self-report survey. Don't try this at home, by the way. And the haphazard conclusion I'm going to draw from that self-report data is some people like Taris because it's immersive, and some people don't like Taris because it's dull. And that's the premise, anyway, of my thought experimental reading of Taris. So I've read a bunch of cognitive narratology articles, and what I've learned about how to break down different elements of stories and evaluate the experiential effects they produce when engaging with the media will guide the way I analyse KotOR, and specifically Taris as a setting with its lore, main questline, world building, and the themes it sketches out. Let's talk about how Taris establishes lore and themes. After crashing onto the planet of Taris, a playable character wakes in an apartment, finding themselves under the watchful eye of KotOR, ex-captain of the recently exploded Endar Spire. Apparently, their escape pod landed in the upper city of Taris, and KotOR was able to drag the unconscious playable character to a nearby abandoned apartment, which is, admittedly, a coincidence resulting from a near shameful narrative contrivance. When I say Taris is genius, I don't mean to say it's perfect. I mean, it could use some work, but this is Star Wars, so we can hand-wave the unlikelihood of the escape pod landing across the road from a conspicuously vacant apartment via claiming that it was the Force providing a guiding hand.
Influence lost Kreia, yes. Oh, I did pause it just at the right time. She's obviously played KotOR too as well. Some of that's just how Star Wars goes, how the story goes. They wanted you to get from point A to B. Can you imagine if there was this whole thing and like they had to explain on and on about how you managed to get to the apartment and then you actually start Taris? Or you have a part where you're struggling to get to the apartment and then you just start Taris normally. It's like, come on. I feel like that's much better if it was cut for time type thing.
Upon waking from the slumber, which was likely a medical emergency, playable character gets the lowdown on Taris from KotOR. On Taris, there are really rigid class barriers. The city is segmented into 3 parts. At the ground level of the planet is the Undercity, a dark, sunless basement prison world that people get banished to. Built on top of that is the Lower City, a low socioeconomic status underground metropolis. And built atop that is the beautiful surface metropolis of the Upper City, where the wealthiest of the wealthy live. The structure of the world reflects thematic ideas: class, injustice, the hoarding of wealth, and suffering due to socioeconomic status, and financial stress. Our playable character wakes on Taris into its absolute mess of a society. But wait, it gets worse.
Taris is under Sith control. Their fleet is orbiting the planet. They've declared martial law and they've imposed a planet-wide quarantine. But I've been in worse spots.
Taris is also
Extra doubt. Always doubt Carth. But to be fair, in the comics, he has been in worse spots, so that's true.
currently under occupation by the Sith. These Republic officers who just survived getting their ship exploded by the Sith sure are in a precarious situation, having landed on a planet under the control of the enemy forces. Sith soldiers patrol all levels of the Tarisian metropolis, and they have instated a quarantine, which may or may not have anything to do with a serious contagion spreading in the Undercity. The Sith have banned all non-crash landing kinds of travel to and from the planet.
Pathologic is one of the games that I want to play at one point. It's probably thematically appropriate.
And are enforcing this with really intimidating orbital laser cannons. It quickly becomes apparent that escaping Taris will be difficult. Carth, the other Endar Spire survivor, reminds playable character that Bastila, the Jedi, landed somewhere on Taris too.
Bastila is the key to the whole Republic war effort. The Sith must have found out that she was on the Endar Spire and set an ambush for us in this system. I believe Bastila was on one of the escape pods that crashed down here at Taris. For the sake of the Republic war effort, we have to try and find her. While you were out, I did some scouting around. There are reports of a couple of escape pods crashing down into the Undercity. It's probably a good place to start. But the Undercity's a dangerous place. I don't want to go there unprepared, and it won't do Bastila any good if we go and get ourselves killed.
Carth is adamant that he and playable character should start searching for Bastila, which ensues our first quest, the search for Bastila. You get a few dialogue options in which you can attempt to disregard Bastila, but Carth explains Bastila's galactic importance and implores playable character to help him search for her. Why? Well, the thing is, our story really starts years prior to playable characters crash landing on Taris, and it starts with the Mandalorian Wars. Mandalorian forces swept the galaxy and engaged the Republic. The Republic asked the Jedi for support, but the Jedi Council refused. They apparently saw some sort of greater threat on the horizon which they were really shady about and would not describe in any detail. Power, as a concept, has already wreaked havoc through the galaxy. The Mandalorians at this stage were using their military power to devastate the galaxy. The Republic didn't seem to have enough power to stop them, but the Jedi, who were space wizards who wield enough power to turn the tide of battle, refused to use that power to help the Republic. Some Jedi, though, resented this decision. This is where Jedi Revan and Malak enter the story. Revan and Malak decide to act against the Council's wishes. Revan's charisma draws a lot of young Jedi to their cause, and off they go to fight alongside the Republic in the Mandalorian Wars. They opt to use their power for what they, at the time, thought was a worthy cause. Yet, after the Mandalorian Wars, Revan and Malak disappeared and returned sometime after as Sith Lords, wielding the very power they once used to try to save the galaxy to now attempt to conquer it for themselves. It seems this was the greater threat
That's a pretty good summary of it.
the Jedi Council saw in the first place. The fall of two powerful Jedi to the dark side, and the devastating abuses of power that would result. The history lessons we get from the characters' dialogues in the early games seem to suggest that the moral of the story is that power corrupts. Generally speaking, one of the major themes of Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is power. Not too soon after this, one of the Sith Lords fell in battle. The famous Bastila Shan faced off against Darth Revan and won. Only the Sith Lord Darth Malak remains, and he is the one that has invaded Taris, declared martial law, and enforced quarantine. Bastila seems to be the only one who wields enough power to stand as a threat against Darth Malak, which is why an ambush was set for Bastila's ship, the Endar Spire, and why the Sith forces are searching for her on the planet of Taris. Bastila wields power. To be precise, the power Bastila wields is twofold, literal and political. In the literal sense, Bastila wields the ability of battle meditation, described by characters as the ability to influence the morale of people fighting in a conflict. The power of battle meditation is narratively significant. It is an ability that links the ideas of power and influence. In a literal sense, it is the power of influence. Characters say that Bastila's battle meditation inspires fighters on one side of a battle, whilst influences the other side to lose their will to fight. Thinking this through, this is likely influencing both biological processes as well as impacting individuals cognitively. The power may alter the physiological fight or flight response, maybe increasing adrenaline and influencing some to the fight response and others to the flight response. This power would also alter decision making on an emotional and psychological level.
Yeah, it's such a big power, and that's why it ended up being a rare thing to be able to have battle meditation, because it's so powerful. Like, it has roots in the very early expanded universe lore, and then Knights of the Old Republic just brings that a bit more to the public consciousness by being in a video game. It's pretty awesome.
And perhaps people are vulnerable to this via the tampering with their fight or flight responses. The power of battle meditation is the power to literally exert influence over people, bypassing their free will. In Bastila's power itself are the notions of power and influence encroaching on, invading, and taking control of the individual.
And that's also a lot of a dark side type of power thing of like dominating people's minds and all that.
Violating one's autonomy and the sanctity of one's mind to feel awe-inspired or to be rendered listless in despair.
They say the Force can do terrible things.
The sanctity of one's mind is also a thing in KotOR.
Mind. Wipe away your memories and destroy your very identity.
And this violating power is what the Jedi and the Republic are calling their last hope. It's an abuse of power, of influence. It's the same thing that the Sith do politically and militarily. If you can't beat them, I guess. Bastila's other political dimension of power rests upon the literal strength of her battle meditation power. Politically, she stands as a threat to Darth Malak because his power comes from his overwhelming military force. It's mentioned in the early game that no one knows how Darth Malak and Revan amassed such a huge army in the time that they disappeared after the Mandalorian Wars, but they came back with huge numbers enough to entirely overwhelm the Republic. Bastila's power, however, renders those numbers immaterial. It doesn't matter if Malak has thousands upon thousands of soldiers on his side if none of them fight for his cause. And Bastila has the power to make that a reality. Thus, she wields a great amount of power to influence the political goings-on of the galaxy. As a result, in KotOR, the idea that power influences reality is significant. On Taris, the player is made to feel how regular citizens are influenced by powers that people like Revan, Malak, and Bastila wield. The game makes the player experience having to navigate reality as being subject to the intentions and whims of these crazy space wizards. Playable character was just subject to the attack the Sith launched on the Endar Spire to get to Bastila. After escaping the battle, Carth and playable characters' lives and autonomy are subsumed under the vital importance of finding Bastila.
Bastila is the key to the whole Republic war effort. For the sake of the Republic war effort, we have to try and find her.
Someone who wields enough power to shift the political landscape. Through the Sith's oppressive occupation of Taris, the game establishes the life of the people of Taris as they are subject to the grand exopolitical influences that Sith and Jedi wield. As the Tarisians complain about the Sith occupation, the text is making an example of them being subject to Sith power, which, by the way, is sourced by the constant threat of violence. They're not carrying blaster rifles around the upper city for no reason. Figuratively, Taris is in a state of exopolitical superposition. Due to the quarantine that the Sith imposed on Taris, the setting is able to exist in two states at once in the narrative, as an example of the political narrative stakes, whilst existing as separate and isolated from the rest of the galaxy. Since the Sith occupied the planet, declared martial law, and established the strict quarantine, the state of the planet makes an example of the ultimate narrative stakes at the broader scope. Sith domination. The bad thing that is at risk of happening in this narrative is that the Sith might conquer the entire universe and take over all the planets, abuse everyone, and rule with impunity in their violent and corrupt hierarchical system. Yet, in this setting, new players get to know and understand the concept of Sith taking over the galaxy in an example that operates on the local scale. One planet, which travel to and from is restricted, with Sith soldiers patrolling the metropolis. The game demonstrates the threat of the Sith in a way that is visually clear. It's difficult to hold the idea of galactic domination in a single thought in one's mind, but the Sith directly taking over a local area, that's a really clear visual image. The local threat can then be extrapolated out to the galactic scope through the question, what if this happens across many planets?
That's a very good point. And a lot of the other planets you don't see as deeply as Taris, so it just establishes the whole what will happen if the Sith take over thing. That's awesome.
What will become of the
Way to
galaxy
put it.
then? What's genius about Taris as an introduction to the game is that it gives the player the experience of being subject to these grand exopolitical powers and influences. We're not just given a history lesson. The embodied experience of the playable character as an avatar is literally subject to both the powers of the Sith and Bastila's potential political power. Our movement across the cities of Taris is restricted by Sith presence, but we are motivated to act by Bastila's importance and political power. Karth keeps saying Bastila is our last hope, so we must try to find her. Her significance influences the playable character's actions. We experience the early game as a mere subject to greater powers. This frames the playable character as an underdog, the nobody from some ship that got exploded who now must try to save the galaxy. Taris being cut off from the rest of the galaxy makes the notion of war or fighting seem somewhat distant. KotOR starts small and slowly builds up to big conflicts with the Sith scheduled toward the latter end of the game. But early on, even the Battle of the Endar Spire seems distant, with the citizens of Taris speaking hushedly of the few Republic escape pods that crashed into the Undercity, but no one planetside has any real understanding or insight into what the significance of that conflict was. The people of Taris, while frustrated with their occupation situation, don't speak with an awareness of what's happening outside of Taris. They don't express concern about the Sith taking over all planets. They seem to just sort of be waiting for the quarantine to end, and there's no guarantee that it ever will. These characters' dialogue build up the conflicts between the Sith and the Jedi and Republic as external, something bigger, something vast. The dialogue from the people of Taris builds up this notion of being subject to these conflicts in the galaxy. Or maybe this is just a byproduct of so many people on Taris being really self-involved and I'm just reading too much into it. There's something I really like about Taris is that...
No, it's all there. It's all there if you want to overthink it and think about it that deeply. That's the amazing thing of, like, the good writing, the great writing of KotOR, even if there are some parts that could be improved with it. Man, the experience. You can read into it so much more than the surface level. Hardy ha, I'm just gonna play through it and have fun.
There is so much time for the characters to slowly build up lore just through conversation. We build up our knowledge of recent galactic history, the context of the Mandalorian Wars and the actions of Revan and Malak and their fall to the dark side. We, as a nobody, get to navel gaze at these folkloric figures that shaped history. They seem like important people doing important things off in the distance. Bastila herself is a sort of mythic figure in the early game. Bastila does end up being like a core party member, but we go hours without seeing her face. It's a really interesting choice. As we hear of her war-tide turning power from the ill-fated Trask Olgo and the impassioned Cartha Nassi, we know Bastila as a powerful, heroic silhouette. We are led to imagine her greatness, to wonder how she faced off with Darth Revan and won. Bastila, for all intents and purposes, seems like she's positioned to be the hero of this story, especially compared to playable characters' humble beginnings. Bastila's greatness is spoken of to also motivate playable character, to impress upon them that finding Bastila is of utmost importance. Bastila is put on a pedestal that playable character does not share. Yet. After wandering around Taris for a while, a few things become clear to the player. 1. The Sith, having restricted movement between the upper, lower and undercities of Taris, require the playable character to scrounge up official papers or a convincing disguise to move through the city. 2. Bastila's escape pod crashed into the Undercity, except 3. She has been kidnapped from the crash site by a so-called swoop gang known as the Black Vulkars that frequent the lower city, and 4. Bastila has been posted as a prize for the Tarisian swoop bike race by the aforementioned gang. Playable character and Karth eventually strike an alliance with a rival gang, the Hidden Becks, the leader of which, Gavin, supposes that winning the swoop bike race is the only way to free Bastila.
I might be able to help you with this.
So we have to enter the race and win, but to ensure our win, we have to get a prototype swoop bike accelerator engine that the Becks invented but the Vulkars stole, so Gavin tells us to find some kid named Mission,
Mission Vale.
Mission? How is she supposed to help them with this?
who hangs out in the other city, and convince her to help us break into the Vulkars base and steal it back. Once we get into the Undercity, we have to be careful and watch out for that dangerous contagion in the Undercity that turns people into slimy werewolves by as little as a scratch. So once we fight through a few of those and save some folks and locate Mission, she tells us that her Wookiee best friend has been kidnapped by Gamorrean slavers, so we spring into action to rescue that guy. In exchange, she helps us break into the Volker base to get the special engine. Did you get all that? I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. We should be all familiar with it by now, but that's how it twists and turns.
Section before. Come on, we all know what this is. Yeah, get the thing. Go to the place. Do the stuff. Da-da-da.
Blah, blah, blah.
What I like about Taris is that every piece of information we find during the search for Bastila is actually just a new obstacle. The quest is layered with sci-fi problems that playable character must solve.
And it gets worse the lower you go.
The task of finding Bastila spirals way out of control, much like this video essay. It can actually be tiring finding out just how far we are from finding and rescuing Bastila. I remember when I first made it into the lower city and talked to the Hidden Beck leader, Gadden, I was like, how many things do I have to do? Why is there so much here? This is a big reason why Taris can be such a drag on replays, because I admit, the shine kind of wears off this kind of science fiction writing once you've been through all the obstacles a few times. Realizing...
Yeah, I think that's one of the big points of it, is like, a lot of people don't like Taris based on the replays, and yes, that is step upon step, even on the first playthrough, but it's all new, it's all fresh.
Just how many hoops we have to jump through to get to Bastila is an experience deliberately designed into this narrative, though. The design of the quest to find Bastila on Taris sure has galactic, exopolitical implications, but the trials and tribulations of the quest are local, almost mundane. While this might be counterintuitive for the beginning of a grand space opera, it does call back to the shape of the original Star Wars plot. The film introduced a figure of exopolitical importance, Princess Leia, and once she records a message asking for help with R2-D2, we follow R2-D2 and his friend C-3PO as they crash land onto the planet of Tatooine. The grand-scale galactic quest is placed into a local context. Bastila kind of acts as a parallel to Princess Leia, whilst her battle meditation power is parallel to the Death Star schematics. Playable character, like Luke, is the nobody who gets caught up in the drama of it all, the underdog who gets the call of adventure, who rises to the challenge that the narrative sets. By adding so many layers to the Search for Bastila questline, a specific cognitive experience is being manufactured. The player is being positioned as the underdog, not only by the contrast being sketched out by Bastila's Jedi status and playable character's nobody random recruit status, but by the process of following Bastila's trail and realizing they're always just one or two steps behind someone else, like the swoop gangs.
There's only two gangs worth worrying about here in the Lower City. The Black Volkers and the Hidden Becks.
Or even local crime lord Davik Kang's men, who were just looking for salvage from the Republic escape pods that crashed into the Undercity.
Davik's part of the intergalactic crime syndicate, but I guess everyone knows that.
The more we find out about the layers of obstacles between us and finding Bastila, the more unlikely it seems that we'll succeed in our quest. The more unlikely a victory it is, the more we are positioned as the underdog. The more we are positioned as the underdog, the more impressive it will be when we succeed. The layers of obstacles put in between the player and Bastila also function to draw the player deeper into the lore of Taris. The things that are put between playable character and Bastila are actually doing the task of world building. We get drawn into the drama going on around Taris. We hear Bastila's escape pod crashed into the Undercity, so we learn about the terrible reality of Taris, that the surface of the planet has been turned into an underground prison world where anyone convicted of any crime and their descendants gets banished to. We discover that Bastila has been kidnapped by swoop gangs, so we learn about the swoop gangs of the Lower City and the feud happening between the Becks and the Volkers. When Bastila is posted as a prize for the swoop race, we learn about the big Taris swoop race that acts as our opportunity to free her. The Taris lore is layered and detailed. The player is drawn into the world. Taris feels believable. We become embedded in this story, this world, this universe by the minutiae of Taris. The granular detail of Taris is not just to labour for hours before we get to the lightsaber part, it's to make us feel as though we really embody this character we're role-playing.
I was just thinking as well, with the whole Rakghoul thing, Vector was released in 2008 and KotOR was 2003, okay, so Vector picked up on Rakghouls from KotOR, probably because it became a lot more well-known.
As, to feel as though the story world might even be real. Its realism is achieved through resembling the ways in which life can be mundane, local, personal, and even dull sometimes. The more we believe the story world, the more we connect and embody our character, the more the game will weaponize that against us later.
It's such a great thing though, is that you can immerse yourself so much because Taris is so fleshed out and you've got so much to do in Taris.
expand on that
On
in the next
Taris.
section. Of course, we have one other pretty big goal to complete on Taris, and that is finding a way to escape the planet without getting incinerated by the Sith's orbital laser cannons. Karth actually has this bright idea to steal a local crime lord's prized ship after hearing a rumor in a cantina repeated by a 14-year-old.
But I hear he's got a new
Yeah.
smuggling operation. The Ebon Hawk. I don't know
Bright
much about
idea.
space travel, but I hear that ship's fast enough to break the Sith blockade. Of course, this is all just secondhand rumor.
Where would he keep it, do you know?
If Davik does have a ship, he's got it locked up in his estate. Nobody gets in there.
For a supposedly distinguished Republic pilot and captain, Karth is pretty unhinged. Like, Mission herself says that this is all secondhand rumor, and Karth just takes it 100% at face value and imagines it is totally possible to steal Davik Kang's freighter and somehow outmaneuver the space cannons? Like, okay bud, you go first. I'll be right behind you. Speaking of the Ebon Hawk, Davik and the Exchange,
Davik, the lower city gangs. I even got the scoop on that bounty hunter, KotOR.
anyone who doesn't skip past everyone's at times repetitive dialogue options will notice that there are some really convoluted local political power plays happening on Taris. The characters know that the Sith are formally and forcibly in control of the planet, but what do we find out about how the planet was run prior to that? We hear from the local Dr. Zelka that there was a Republic presence on Taris. They had a military base in the upper city, and were apparently working on a cure for the Rakghoul disease. You know, the slimy werewolf thing going on in the Undercity. The Republic have probably been hanging out on Taris since the Mandalorian Wars, because I do remember reading some obscure lore tidbit online that Taris was a significant location during those wars, but that didn't come from research. That came from me just Googling Star Wars when I was supposed to be doing my science homework when I was 16, so, you know. But everyone from Zelka's assistant
But it's in the KotOR comics, if you're going to read about it.
to shopkeep to Zax and the bounty office takes the time to point out that a criminal organization called the Exchange still hold a ridiculous amount of influence over Taris even after the Sith occupation.
Come on, everybody knows who Davik Kang is. He's the big boss around here.
My life warned me not to take a loan from Davik.
Everyone is afraid of Davik Kang. The crushing economic situation on Taris does mean that a lot of people end up loaning credits from him, and they eventually end up getting hunted down. But playable character has the option of redistributing the wealth and helping people out of their debt to Davik. Davik and the Exchange maintain a presence in all aspects of Tarisian life that are shown, and it's another abuse of power. Davik abuses his wealth and the physical power of his mercenaries over the Tarisian population. Actually, this leads pretty well into a discussion of the criticism of Taris that really needs to be made. The representation of class issues on Taris isn't great. If we stop and think about the complexities of gang violence in the real world, this Star Wars depiction of gang violence is uncomfortable. The violence of the lower city is built up by the dialogues we have with characters in the upper city. Almost everyone in the upper city warns you about the lower city in one way or another.
Except for the lower levels, that's where the swoop gangs hang out. Just stay in upper city and you'll be fine.
It is suggested that the privilege experienced by people who live in the upper city creates bias against the lower city. And this is part of the depiction of Taris as a problematic society that works.
Oh, she at the start said that she was way overthinking it. Hey, there we go. My browser was a bit slow. Yeah, it sets up the entire game. That's the point. Let me reload this tab because it was being slow. Oh, hey, J-Land. Rewards enabled in channel. What? Okay. They do. And I think it's a lot of people reading online about people that have played the game over and over again. And seeing Taris over and over again and not experiencing it fresh and then going, oh, it drags.
Pretty well.
Hey, I like doing React stuff. It's fun to talk about it, especially. Guess what? I've always been a React channel. My first video was reacting to Star Wars books. Well, actually, technically not true, but when I started properly, my first video was reacting to Star Wars books.
But the critique of this bias kind of falls a little flat when it comes to the depiction of the lower city itself. Once we get into the lower city, the depiction of gang violence is frankly cartoonish and oversimplified. The Volker gang are under-realized baddies who attack people randomly and who want to sell Bastila into slavery. They're clearly bad. There's no nuance to their depiction. We don't get to explore why there are gangs in the lower city or how this social phenomenon came to be. There's a vague implication that the inequitable societal structure...
Well, that's... I'm not bothering to look at this separately and react to it on a video. This is the time I will be watching it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't bother to watch it. Because I already know it sets up the whole game. Don't skip Taris. And hey, the comments come up and they can produce some good talking points as well. I think that's what I like about streaming some of the stuff.
Causes issues on Taris that might be related.
But yeah, some of the stuff with the lower city depiction, I can see. It works well in the cutscenes and when you get to the sweet races and that, but it does seem a bit lackluster how much gang violence is brought up and then it's not depicted as much as maybe it should.
To the gangs in some way, but the text isn't
Nah, it's basically just you guys, so I don't get many inflammatory comments.
clear on this. I suppose that a 2003 Star Wars game doesn't necessarily need to depict gang violence with gritty realism, but the
Unless it's Locke on
such an
complaining
issue just
about
doesn't
bots
quite
when he's not
sit
looking.
right in 2024, especially when the text is already kind of on its way to suggest that those societal inequities and the hoarding of wealth is a harmful thing. Why fall short on one of the elements of this societal critique? But then again, nothing's perfect. No game is without flaw. What we do know about the gangs in the lower city is that the feud between the Volkers and the Becks came about when Brejik, the adopted son of the leader of the Becks, betrayed the Becks and left to join the rival gang. Brejik wanted to take over the Becks gang and was incensed when his adopted father Gadon didn't allow this. Brejik's thirst for power led to a betrayal. Now, power, as I suggested earlier, is one of the big themes for KotOR, so this gang conflict is serving the overall thematic exploration of the whole text. And I wonder if betrayal will become relevant. The narrative presents Taris as
It shows. Wonder if betrayal will become relevant. Shows Cart, of course.
Unified society negatively in no uncertain terms. Multiple characters comment on the cruelty of the organisation of the metropolis, with poverty forcing people to live in sunless underground labs.
And this is the first time I've done a react to a video essay as such, so some of it's just me sitting here listening to it like, and I don't have a lot to add to it.
That
I do find that as well.
The rich hoarded food for their own use, and the poor were left to starve and die.
From what I've seen of Taris, it doesn't look like much has changed. Except for the upper city, people here are just as bad off as the poor in your little history.
No one likes the fact that basic rights are things that only the wealthy can afford on Taris.
If they could get away with it, the Tarisian nobles would stuff their own mothers down here to make more room in the upper city.
But playable character doesn't really get the opportunity to interrupt that cycle of suffering on Taris. Sure, we can be generous and pay a few people's way out of debt to Davik,
Giving me 100 credits?
You're giving him 100 credits?
but we can't affect any systemic change. Well, mostly.
Mostly. What do you mean by that?
We do get the opportunity to find evidence of some sort of super secret underground utopia and convince the survivors who are living in the Undercity to attempt to travel along.
And I'd say that's a part of it, making it a realistic setting as well, is that you're the nobody on Taris, and so the nobody can't really affect a systemic change. Sure, we managed to probably end up having... Oh, I see. There will be a systemic change because of the bombing of Taris. And so the systemic change doesn't even become relevant because Taris is ruined by the bombardment. Let's be honest there. They knew they were going to bombard Taris, so they were like, you know, it's because of Bastila and the player character, let's just make it so that they don't have to have a systemic change, so that it would all that effort would go to waste.
Distance to this location. This is an optional quest, and engaging with it does require the player to care about the people of the Undercity enough to want to help them, which implies that in completing the quest, playable character is rejecting the rhetoric that people in the upper cities have that disregards the humanity of the people in the Undercity. So, cool, valuing life and stuff, but that's good. Some of the nicest characters you'll meet are in the Undercity, such as Shalina and Gendar, the leader of the outcast village. We meet Shalina when we first arrive in the Undercity.
My name is Shalina.
She scares off two guys who are trying to get playable character to pay a toll for using the elevator, which, all things considered, it's not really a big deal. Shalina, though, is excited to talk to us. She asks us if the upper city is as beautiful as she's always imagined it to be.
You're from the upworld, aren't you?
And that's part of the thing as well, isn't it? It's showing the way that it was systemically corrupt and oppressive and all that, and then it just gets bombarded, and it mostly would have killed the upper city people and wiped them out, rather than it being the oppressed lower city people too. So in a way, Malik's the good guy.
I've never seen it. I was born here in the Undercity. Is it as nice as they say up there?
Responding to this question gives me pause for thought. If I tell her it's beautiful, will she feel worse for being excluded from that world? If I tell her it's nothing special, will it shatter her dreams? Of course, I never want to tell her that it's better than this festering slime pit because that's a needlessly cruel act, but I always end up erring on the side of truth. because who am I to decide what Shalina should or should not know about the Upper City? If she wants to know, I should tell her the truth. It's pretty. But saying this to a person stuck in the Undercity because an ancestor of hers may have committed a crime taints the beauty of the Upper City. Playable character and Shalina are both in this moment confronted with the ugly, painful truth that the beauty of the Upper City is literally built over the Undercity, built using the oppression of the people in the lower and Undercities.
See, it shows that well.
I've never been to the surface, but sometimes I think I can see it in my dreams. The sun, the sky, the stars. It all sounds so wonderful.
Telling Shalina, who was born in the Undercity and had never seen sunlight, that the Upper City is beautiful.
Yeah,
seems
kinda.
beautiful.
From a certain point of view, J-Land. What I said was true from a certain point of view.
Because the society
In real life, not in video games.
societal structures of Taris are cruel. And if we button mash past Shalina's dialogue, we miss engaging with these thematic ideas around Taris entirely. Once we rescue Zalbar from his kidnappers and break into the Volker base, we actually get a chance to betray the Beck leader Gadon and side with the Volkers. Doing this will score us some major dark side points and potentially steer the young impressionable Mission Veo down a dark path, but
If I felt there were no consequences, well, that's the thing though, is there would still be consequences. So how can I feel like there will be no consequences even to myself or to what would happen there? It's like there's always consequences for any action you take.
ultimately the outcomes of the choice to stay
Yeah, from a certain point of view, we're all just in the Matrix and everything's false.
loyal to the Becks or betray them are very similar. Playable character still competes in a swoop race for one or the other gang, and once playable character wins, Brejik, the leader of the Volkers, attempts to pull Bastila out of being a prize for winning the swoop race. The outcome didn't need to be different because it was the journey to get to this point in the story that was crucial. It brought up the whole betrayal thing again, which is interesting.
The certain point of view thing is just an excuse to hide something by saying, oh, I didn't frame it that way from my point of view.
Let's make a note of that, shall we? Betrayal seems to be gaining some traction as an idea in this narrative. Either way, by the end of the swoop race, one of our big goals for the Taris section has been completed. We have at last located Bastila. We first know Bastila in abstract, by only the ways she is described by other characters. We know her status, her power, her privilege. We were impressed upon with this idea that she must be some mystical Jedi, since such an unusual power, battle meditation, manifested for her at such a young age. We are told of her importance to the war effort and hear how she is the Republic's last hope. And then, when we finally rescue her...
Save me. Is that what you were trying to accomplish by riding in that swoop race? Well, as far as rescues go, this is a pretty poor example. In case you haven't noticed, I managed to free myself from that neural restraint collar without your help. In fact,
But from my point of view, the Jedi are evil. But also, I was thinking of the Obi-Wan Empire Strikes Back quote. Oh no, Return of the Jedi quote with it too.
to say that I saved you.
You're probably expecting me to be all like, you're my hero, thanks for saving poor helpless little me, blah blah blah.
She behaves judgmentally, demanding, and petulant toward us. When we meet Bastila, it's literally a rude shock.
Yeah,
Now that I'm back in charge of this
he
mission,
really
perhaps we can
does.
Start doing things properly. Hopefully our escape from Taris will go more smoothly than when you...
He's like, ha ha ha, I thought about this for many years because I knew that I would never tell you that your father was Darth Vader until later.
rescued me from Brejik.
Oh, she sure doesn't need force lightning to shock people. This is one of my favourite things about KotOR, actually, is that after hours of hearing about the wondrous Bastila Shan and concocting this elaborate, at times ridiculous plan to free her from local gang guy Brejik, she busts herself out of her own cage and yells at us for slacking off. Particularly on the first playthrough of KotOR, it feels like you go through a gargantuan effort to discern where Bastila is and then devise a way to get to her. I like this sort of relay race you end up doing on Taris to get information on Bastila. Like, it's this near comical daisy chain of events, and yet when we finally rescue Bastila, she says to us, "What have you been doing all this time? Can someone show this woman a flowchart of the things that we had to do to locate her?" It's infuriating. But that's what I love about it. The contrast between the mythical, abstract, heroic battle meditation wielding Bastila and the petty, bossy, short-sighted reality of Bastila the individual.
Now that I'm back in charge of this mission, perhaps we can start doing things properly.
People are messy, flawed, and strange, and Bastila's abrasive attitude when we meet her represents that so well. Bastila contains multitudes.
It's hard to tell. Some AI is so good now. Of course, it's also just not someone talking, it's that. But, hey, so the actual text, so, does it say anything about it? Don't know. But yeah, I like what she's saying about you have this image built up and then you meet her and then it's completely opposite of what you sort of expect because she's so built up as this hero figure and what everyone's saying.
Which I love, even if she annoys me, and she does most of the time. But the contrast between mythic Bastila and flawed Bastila...
Actually, no, there was a small audio editing thing that I noticed earlier, so I don't think that it's AI narrated, because it would have said the word properly instead of the start of the word being clipped off. So I feel like this is actually someone talking properly. There was this thing where she must have said something a bit wrong and then said it again, but then in the actual edit that was clipped that little bit off, maybe because one word ran into the other a little bit.
also serves to remind playable character that despite their valiant efforts and incredible feats, such as becoming the dueling ring champion and the swoop race champion and the having to suffer KotOR dialogues champion and defeating intergalactic assassins and winning at cards, they're still the underdog.
After all, they're looking for Bastila, not a couple of grunts like us.
They don't have the importance, the status that Bastila has. Bastila is having a main character moment. Bastila attempts to assume a leadership main character position when she joins the party due to her Jedi status. The rude shock of Bastila's personality works in tandem with her attempts to assume a central position in the group and the narrative to remind playable character that they are an underdog, a nobody, Republic recruit. This sets up playable character for the transformation they go through during the narrative from underdog to OP. Taris is the stage for the quest to find Bastila, and the shock of meeting her makes for a salient, memorable point in the narrative which is employed to position the playable character as an underdog even after the demonstration of fantastical heroic feats during the process of rescuing Bastila.
Bastila,
Yeah.
you're alive! Finally things are looking up. Now we just need to figure out a way to get off this planet.
You mean you don't have a plan to get off Taris yet? What have you been doing all this time? I see. Now that I'm back in charge of this mission, perhaps we can start doing things properly. Hopefully our escape from Taris will go more smoothly than when you rescued me from Brejik.
Bastila gets ratioed for her attitude and behaviour toward the party by KotOR being uncharacteristically reasonable.
I know you're new at this, Bastila, but a leader doesn't berate her troops just because things aren't going as planned.
Yeah.
Don't let your ego get in the way of the real issues here.
Bastila doesn't take kindly to his advice.
That hardly strikes me as an appropriate way of addressing your commander, KotOR. I am a member of the Jedi Order, and this is my mission. Don't forget that. My battle meditation ability has helped the Republic many times in this war, and it will serve us well here, I'm sure.
Your talents might win us a few battles, but that doesn't make you a good leader. A good leader would at least listen to the advice of those who have seen more combat than she ever will.
Bastila tries to pull rank, but she has no capital to pull.
Yes, I love how Car talks back to her.
Yes, you're right, of course. I apologize, KotOR. This has been a difficult time for me. Of course, I'm happy to listen to your advice. What do you suggest we do?
First off, we can't get hung up on who's in charge. We all need to work together if we want to get off this rock. The answer is out there, we just have to find it.
Well said, KotOR. And the sooner we start looking, the better. I've already been a prisoner of the Vulkars, and I don't plan on being captured by the Sith.
These few lines of dialogue also serve to remind us that they're coming from very different perspectives and they're drawing from different prior experiences. In this moment, the game leans into the growing pains of a haphazardly formed ensemble cast trying to figure out how to work together. The distress Bastila seems to be in about the team not already having a solid plan to get off Taris also serves as a reminder that this is probably going to be a difficult, dangerous, demanding task, gesturing again to the narrative stakes. The potential that the Sith might take over the entire galaxy if the protagonists don't successfully escape Taris without getting captured or vaporized. There's something compelling about the legendary Jedi last hope of the galaxy obviously freaking out about the current pickle the protagonists are in. On Taris, the narrative really intentionally employs Bastila's status in a variety of ways to interesting narrative effects. After Bastila starts settling into the party, the next time we leave the apartment, we are approached by some random person telling us that Candaris Ordo, one of Davek's mercenaries, wants to meet with us. We've crossed paths with Candaris a few times in the lower and under cities, and he kind of seems like an alright guy. Like, he's actually kind of, like, nice. Like, he stops to have an entire conversation with the playable character just so that we can get information on the Republic escape pods and how dangerous the rat ghouls are.
Yeah.
Don't move. I'm not afraid to use this blaster if I have to.
Settle down, kid. We've already lost enough men to those damn rat ghouls. By the looks of you, I'd say you're down here for the same reason we are. To salvage something from those downed Republic space pods. Let me give you some
space pods, yeah,
Forget
come
about
on.
it. Do yourself a favor and just head back from where you came. This isn't a good place to stand around chatting. The Undercity is crawling with rat ghouls. I've already lost a half a dozen men to those monsters.
Candaris, I heard something. Over there in the shadows.
Looks like we've got company. Get those blasters ready, boys. I told Davik this salvage mission was a bad idea. His men
We're trying to have a convo.
I can't babysit them all.
Yes,
Okay, boys.
classic KotOR. Karth is shooting something in the background while they're having a conversation. Perfect.
We're getting out of here before I lose anyone else. You'd be smart to get out of here as well. Even if you can handle the rat ghouls, I doubt there's anything worth finding anymore. Davik sent me down here with this motley crew to scavenge whatever we could from the Republic escape pods that crashed during the recent battle overhead. But the lower city gangs got here first. What are you, an off-worlder? Everyone knows Davik. You know, the interstellar crime syndicate. Smuggling, gambling, extortion. Davik controls it all here on Taris. That's why I'm working
I love
for him.
it.
But lately,
It's so
the lower
good.
city gangs have been giving my boss some trouble. This isn't really the best place to have these kinds of conversations. But I guess I could spare a couple of seconds for you.
Let's go!
After all, you did help us out with those rat ghouls. The lower city is overrun with gangs. But the two most important ones are the Hidden Becks and the Black Vulkars.
He's providing exposition, yeah.
The others in line. But lately, the Black Vulkars are moving in on Beck turf. And the Vulkars are even starting to defy Davik. Take these escape pods, for example. Everyone knew Davik would want first crack at them. But I know for a fact those damn Vulkars have already sent their own salvage party down here. Come on, boys, let's move out.
We do know that not everyone on Davik's payroll has enough patience to do that.
Go away.
But Candaris reaches out to the main character to propose a way of getting off Taris. He suggests that we, plus a droid, should break into the local Sith military base, steal the launch codes, which will get you off the planet without getting vaporized by those orbital space cannons, and then he wants to take playable character and a party member into Davik's estate so that we can steal his ship.
I saw you in the swoop race. Very impressive. You seem like you know how to get results. That's just the kind of person I'm looking for. I've got a plan to escape Taris, but I can't do it alone. I need someone I know can get the job done to help me. That's where you come in.
Strangely enough, Karth isn't keen on this idea.
Mercs like this having a lick of conscience. They'll betray you in a heartbeat. This could be a trap.
I ain't talking to you. I'm talking to your friend, aren't I?
I mean, yes, this line of dialogue is motivated by his betrayal and trust issues, but it really seems that he's just upset that Candaris is like taking his idea. Like, he was the one that first mentioned wanting to steal the Ebon Hall from Davik Kane, and now this like random mercenary guy is like, I have an entire plan to do it, and Karth never got that far, and he's like, man, it's just stealing my thunder.
Karth will remember that. Yeah. I don't think I'd noticed that as much, or it wasn't in the forefront of my mind that Candaris, when Misha mentioned it, Karth had actually come up with the idea, and now Candaris is going, yeah, we can do that, and that's why he says that. That's something that I'd only notice if I sort of replayed it more times closer together, probably.
Anyone crazy enough to race like that is probably crazy enough to break into the Sith military base. I need someone to steal the Sith launch codes from the base. Without those codes, any ship leaving the atmosphere will be disintegrated by the Sith fleet's automated defense guns.
Headcanons aside, this is how Candaris ends up joining the party. And once Candaris and Bastila spend some time together in the party, dialogues ensue. I assume that most people would have taken Bastila along to Davik's estate. You have to take Candaris because he's sort of your escort in there, and I figure that most people would want, you know, a powerful Jedi who may or may not have leveled up to the point where they can use a heal ability to invade this base. Admittedly, I took Karth, but moving on. The Mandalorian.
Yeah. You can take whoever you want. I forget who I took now in the playthrough.
Mercenary Candaris manages to satirically encapsulate Bastila in his reference to her as a Jedi princess, in a dialogue that has a chance to happen if you travel with both characters in your party, which I assume would happen at Davik's estate because I figure everyone else makes more reasonable party decisions than I do. The figurative Jedi princess mantle is the pedestal she has been put on publicly, historically, narratively, though Bastila pushes back on Candaris's assessment of her, recounting how she's had to sacrifice for her life as a Jedi. She's not wrong either. She was removed from her parents at a young age, as most Jedi are, and raised in an authoritarian environment that taught her to cut off her emotions rather than process them, which was a problem for her because Bastila has a lot of emotions, stemming particularly from her difficult relationship with her mother and the issue that her father seemed to have with behaving unpredictably and kind of irresponsibly. It makes sense to me that Bastila's battle meditation power manifested in this context. I personally imagine it as coming from probably becoming hypersensitive to her parents' emotional states as a child due to the instability of her family unit.
See, just there was a little imperfection in the speech that sounds like a more human thing than an AI thing would do. Then again, I haven't heard a lot of good AIs to know.
But I digress.
Anyway.
Due to the manifestation of her battle meditation, Bastila was placed under a lot of pressure by the Jedi. Her power, her existence, suddenly had great intergalactic exopolitical consequence, and she, as such, lost some of herself to that consequentiality. She wasn't just herself anymore. She was Bastila who can do battle meditation, which is the last hope against the onslaught of the Sith in a Star War. Becoming a Jedi princess was quite the sacrifice for Bastila. And all this, once again, is contrasted to how playable character enters this narrative. Comparatively, at this stage, they're just much less interwoven.
But I figure if we don't do anything stupid, we should be okay. I mean, after all, they're looking for Bastila, not a couple of grunts like us.
Taris, with its beautiful surface world, heartbreaking societal inequities, and exopolitical superposition, is compelling. As playable character gets to know the world, its issues and limitations, they are continually working on coming up with a plan of escape, which Candace's Order just swoops in and resolves for us, much to Karth's dismay. The world of Taris itself is a puzzle box. The game gets the player invested in the world and the solving of the puzzle box, and then that box gets obliterated. Sith Lord Malak decides, practically on a whim, that if he can't locate Bastila on Taris, that Taris should be obliterated.
The search for Bastila is taking too long. We cannot risk her escaping Taris. Destroy the entire planet.
Even his second-in-command, Saul Kereth, double takes at this.
The entire planet, Lord Malak.
Malak is going so hard on his Sith kick that he cares not for the fact that their own forces are still planet-side. To Malak, the deletion of Taris means the deletion of Bastila, and that means the deletion of the Republic war effort against him. So the only place we've ever known in-game is about to be destroyed. We get a cutaway cutscene to Malak giving the order to wipe this pathetic planet from the face of the galaxy, just as playable character is infiltrating Davik Kang's estate.
It's not like you to take on partners, Candace. You're getting soft.
Watch yourself, Callum.
Enough. I won't have my top two men killing each other. That's not good business.
This is a special case, Davik. I ran into someone the Exchange might want to recruit. You may have heard something of their exploits already.
Ah, yes. Now I recognize your companion. The rider who won the big swoop race. Very impressive, as was your display in the rather heated battle afterwards.
So even as playable character and allies are sieging the local crime lord's base to the ends of stealing a ship, we are nervously awaiting apocalypse. Sith cannons eventually start blasting down onto Taris just as playable character and friends make it to the ship they plan to steal in order to steal away from Taris.
Damn those Sith, they're bombing the whole planet. I knew they'd turn on us sooner or... Oh.
The destruction of Taris introduces the concept of change and lasting consequences to the game. As a result of the villainous actions, a level and narrative setting is permanently inaccessible, unavailable to the player for revisits. Once we escape Taris, there's no going back. Malak has devastated the planet and there's nothing we can do about it. The destruction of Taris also acts as a potential open bookend, because if it happened once, it could happen again. That's a haunting proposition. The effects of this open bookend are narratively profound, but also mechanically could raise some frustrating issues in context of actually just completing actions in the game effectively and efficiently. I mean, imagine, just hypothetically, you spend hours hunting...
Actually, that could be a point to why Taris takes longer as well, is that it gets destroyed, so they make sure that you spend longer on Taris. Whereas all of the other planets, you can run around for however long you want, and always go back to them.
Lizards on Tatooine so you can sell their skulls at 24 credits a pop to save up 15,000 credits to purchase a spectacular piece of armor that happens to come in your favorite color, only to find that at some random point in the game the shop doesn't exist anymore because the planet it was on has been violently erased from the galaxy. But I digress back to Taris. I always felt, though, that the actual destruction of Taris was a little too off-screen. The absence of Taris is felt in the game through the inability to return to it and through the grief of characters who lived on Taris, such as Mission and someone else who doesn't really have enough relevance in this video essay to justify me spending time explaining who they are. And I won't go into details, but Karth's personal backstory also deals with
Jahan,
the
just
planetary
coming
devastation.
It wasn't, no. I mean, they just bombarded the planet and slagged it, basically, but it wasn't completely erased.
So All in all, even if we didn't get a sequence like we would later see in popular KotOR fanfiction work Mass Effect 3 that shows a devastating...
Yeah, we see the Taris restoration project in KotOR. Because I think there was something or other about it being too dangerous to inhabit until they cleared it out and all that. That's probably the first incorrect thing she said that I've noticed. Of like, yes, it was bombarded, not erased. If you're gonna say erased, that's like Alderaan was erased. There's just rocks left where it was. But they didn't have Death Stars then, so they bombarded it and destroyed all the cities and whatnot. And yet, even for a planet, Taris feels small, right? Because you've got that one city. That's the part you explored. And the Undercity, but the rest of the planet is anyone's guess.
Invasion of Earth and the destruction of a city, probably due to budget and technological limitations, we got to see damage to characters through the medium of dialogue, and in Karth's case, long-term behavioural issues resulting from the kind of damage that Malik does to planets such as Taris. There is a palpable sense of loss that comes from finishing Taris level, which disallows players any sense of achievement. Yes, we've finished the early game and are about to progress into the game proper, but this isn't really a success. The terrible threat of Sith is solidified. The Sith occupation of Taris sets up the narrative stakes of Sith taking over the galaxy, and then delivers on the fears we might hold about that tenfold. The destruction of Taris...
Hey, the Sith are still in power, that's the thing. It's like, it shows you the Sith are still in power as well. Rather than in other places, you're actually starting to get a bit of a upper hand against the Sith in some parts.
delivers on the narrative stakes hard. The Sith have just demonstrated that they pose a grand, existential, apocalyptic threat. Playable character and their crew escape Taris on the stolen Ebon Hawk as the Sith bombard the planet. They actually keep the ship for the rest of the game. Finders keepers, I suppose. At Bastila's suggestion, the crew take respite on the planet Dantooine, where a Jedi enclave just happens to be. But on Dantooine, playable character learns the ways of Jedi. We finally get force powers. We finally get a lightsaber. We finally get to start telling people these aren't the droids you're looking for. For a Star Wars game...
The droid side quests, that's what I think of when she says about the droids.
We just spent such a long time not being a Jedi. Taris was a very specific and intentional build-up to the acquisition of Jedi powers. Literal Jedi powers, as well as the potential political power Jedi like Bastila wield. When we become a Jedi on Dantooine, we start taking on Jedi responsibilities. We're asked to investigate local crimes and sort out family feuds, which is also the resolution of two crimes. Once we're a Jedi, we get to play CSI Dantooine. Playable character gets treated very differently by other characters that populate the story universe once they become a Jedi. As playable character progresses through the game, they graduate from random citizen caught up in a thing to one of the agents that wield influence over the entire galaxy. We steal the status of main character away from Bastila. Later in the game, as playable character levels up and becomes a more powerful Jedi, they level up into an agent of influence much like Bastila. As the plot progresses, playable character's existence is assigned more and more consequence and more potential political power, just like Bastila. We get to level up mechanically and improve the chances that we roll big numbers when attacking enemies, but we also get to level up the character's importance in the story. Now, the text doesn't necessarily frame this as a good thing, and so it shouldn't. The sacrifices Bastila had to make in order to take on the mantle of Jedi Princess implied that our own graduation into Jedi royalty would come with drawbacks. And yes, all the while playable character gets to zoom around the galaxy saving people and hunting things, there are drawbacks. Playable characters' responsibilities increase, and there's considerably more at stake in their adventures. Tensions rise in the team due to things that...
That's how RPGs work. You level up, you get more importance, the stakes are raised.
Happen? It's a sign of a good narrative that manages to steadily increase its scope and heighten its stakes, and KotOR certainly delivers on this. After Taris, we get to visit 6 planets, and depending on the version you're playing, possibly an edgy space station that has a shop filled with expensive items. It's the limitations of Taris that make it feel as though there has been a drastic transformation in the game, going from stuck in one city to flying around the galaxy as we please. When that one person on Reddit asks, does KotOR get better after Taris? And the answer is, yes it does. That decisive and comically delivered answer is because of the contrast that I'm talking about here. If we didn't have that contrast between the local secluded Taris and the freedom of the rest of the game, that succinct answer wouldn't work. In fact, I think this might have been a way of overcoming the technological limitations of the game as a whole, because KotOR still doesn't give us the kind of freedom that we might expect in a modern RPG, Skyrim or something, or whatever the new one is, I don't know, I'm old. But by contrasting the exploration of these 6 planets with being stuck on Taris for a few hours, we feel like we have gained a vast amount of freedom and independence. But if we just started the game from Dantooine and then were shoved off into the galaxy and got to choose between 6 planets, it would become a little bit more like, I don't know, Tomb Raider 3, where you just got to choose between different levels, but really there was kind of an intended order in which you had to play the levels. But Taris makes the space exploration feel exploratory and not like Tomb Raider 3. If you haven't played Tomb Raider 3, then it's not going to make any sense, but oh well.
Yeah, I haven't played Tomb Raider 3, so there you go. I don't know. But I get what she means about it being a completely different experience if you just pick whichever one you go to. And you started with Dantooine. Like, Taris is definitely something that's needed to get a lot of background and lore and all of that good stuff that's been talked about already.
Okay, the time has come. Big spoiler warning. I'm about to discuss late game spoilers. If you haven't played KotOR,
late game spoilers.
Knowing this thing I'm about to say before playing it might completely change the experience of the game. So, just in case you're interested in playing it, I'm doing a little extra spoiler warning. Okay? Are we ready? I'm gonna say the thing now. Okay. Taris is instrumental in building up the big plot twist of KotOR. All of this work to position playable character as the underdog is revealed as a mean trick, because playable character isn't really a random nobody Republic recruit at all. Playable character is revealed to be Darth Revan, Dark Lord of the Sith. I don't know why I'm saying this like you don't know, of course you know, and anyone who doesn't know I sent away at the beginning of the section, but I don't know, I'm having fun, I guess. 3/4 of the way through the game, playable character and their companions are captured by Saul Kereth, Karth's old superior. After some torture and a daring escape, Darth Malak shows up and starts talking to playable character as if he has a historic beef with them. Malak reveals that, all the while Bastila is famous for killing Darth Revan, it is Malak who turned on his Sith Master and shot Revan's ship. Bastila saved Revan's life, presumably through some Force heal shenanigans, and captured Revan, alive. The Jedi Council wiped Revan's memory and gave them a brand new identity, and planned to use playable character to lead the Jedi to the secret behind the Sith forces that Revan and Malak amassed after the end of the Mandalorian Wars. All the work done on Taris to position playable character as a nobody underdog is turned on its head, intensifying the shock of the plot twist. The rug of role-playing in a Star Wars universe as a character you created gets pulled out from underneath you. Your identity was predetermined, and the character creation process itself you complete at the beginning of the game becomes a mechanical representation of the Jedi Council wiping Revan's mind and constructing a new identity in place of their original personality.
They said the Force can do terrible
Yeah, that's a great twist. Such impact.
The revelation is devastating, and part of that devastation is constructed by the specific, tedious, layered, underdog-affecting search for Bastila questline on Taris. Taris is essential to creating the conditions to cognitively experience the late-game plot revelation just the right, devastating way. We go from starting as the underdog nobody Republic recruit to being the biggest somebody in recent intergalactic history, Dark Lord of the Sith, and that transformation is highlighted through the contrast that Taris makes with the late-game plot twist. Personal note, when I first got to this plot twist, I was so devastated I just started the whole game again because it felt wrong. I do kind of regret...
Why would you restart the game if it devastates you? Like, I get walking away and not playing it for a bit maybe or something, but like, you know that's coming up anyway if you restart the game. Anyway, you could probably do a separate save and then just load that, but anyway.
Actually going back and starting again because I should have just played to the end of the game living with this shock. The effect of the narrative was so salient that I couldn't cope. Also, I'd like to note that some of the strange wooden dialogue options that are conspicuously void of nuance could be explained by the revelation that the Jedi Council wiped Revan's mind and filled it with a new personality. If you've ever wondered why the dialogue options you get to choose from seem kind of flat, I think the Jedi Council reprogramming Revan's mind had something to do with it. What framework would the Jedi Council have given Revan in which to recognize and operate complex, nuanced takes?
That's an interesting fan explanation for that. That's a neat way to look at it.
Why would they take that risk? Would the Council have given the person who questioned their authority in the Mandalorian Wars the option to do that all over again? Or would they have just installed some black and white thinking about good and evil? Are any of the so-called choices we've made even choices at all? Or have we just been literally
influence gained
things? Is the programming of the material game itself being employed as an allegory for the implantment of the Jedi Council's reprogramming of Revan? And if this is the case, can we really consider the choices we make as choices at all if all outcomes were programmed? Do we have free will? I feel like I'm getting myself into trouble here.
all the influence gained to Kreia.
Is everything that Taris established is designed to sharpen the emotional experience of playable character being revealed as Revan in the late game. And it's genius. Taris isn't just a prologue, nor is it a tutorial world. Though it does provide a gently sloped learning curve and allows players to get used to the game, Taris does so much more than that. The humble and geographically limited setting of the quarantined Taris sets up the game to contrast to its later content. The ability to explore different planets in the galaxy in the Ebon Hawk is brought into sharp focus by an early game that limits such movement for the player. In 1979, scholar Menachem Perry stated, "The ordering and distribution of the elements in a text may exercise considerable influence on the nature, not only of the reading process, but of the resultant whole as well. A rearrangement of the components may result in the activation of alternative potentialities in them, and in the structuring of a recognizably different whole." Perry's article, which this quote is from, Literary Dynamics, How the Order of a Text Creates Its Meanings, is considered a landmark essay in the development of cognitive narratology. This perspective is what gives me the confidence to assert that skipping Taris entirely has implications on audiences' perception of the narrative whole of KotOR. Your experience...
And if you're skipping Taris on a replay, that's a different thing as well, be different kettle of fish. But also, if you're replaying it and you want to experience the story, why are you skipping Taris? It's a game you play to experience the story.
It's just going to be different. You're going to feel different. You're going to be primed to experience the late game differently if we skip Taris. I should note, Perry, in 1979, was talking strictly about written and verbal narratives. And while Perry probably never imagined this work being invoked in a discussion about a video game, it's still applicable to KotOR's narrative. The game as a whole is made up of both written and verbal storytelling. Perry talks about how audiences engage with storytelling as an activity. Perry highlights how elements of narrative come together in storytelling, calling it a concertization. I really liked this term for the way it imagines the elements of a story as different instruments operating in harmony to create an overall effect, and that the audience experience of the story is not just cataloguing the different parts of the story, but the experiential moment that happens in real time when all these things are operating at once in our minds. I thought this term could be useful in describing Taris. Taris is one of the many vital instruments that plays in the concertization of KotOR. It establishes the narrative stakes, it constitutes playable characters' transformation from underdog to hero and/or villain. It hits the notes of the main theme, power, betrayal. It does a lot. The search for Bastila, while a rather long introduction to the character, serves to frame the playable character as an underdog in the early game, highlighting them as a random Republic recruit who gets caught up in a star war. Bastila's importance to the war effort compels this character to act, yet, most interestingly, the narrative then takes the opportunity to contrast Bastila's status with her abrasive personality. When Bastila joins the party, she kind of assumes she'll just be the star of the show now, as I mentioned. Usually in RPGs, the main character's centrality to the narrative isn't challenged, but KotOR deliberately avoids this trope in service of creating scope for its narrative. I mean, Bastila just shows up and is like, "Why are you acting like the main character? Clearly it's me." By doing this, we get to see a greater contrast between where a playable character started out in the game as an underdog and how they transform toward the end of the game. This goes double for when we're revealed to be playing as Revan. While on Taris, Bastila enjoys a particular Jedi Princess last hope for the galaxy status that playable character does not. Over the course of the game, as playable character levels up and becomes a powerful Jedi themselves, the distance between that early game Taris sequence puts between playable character and Jedi Princess Bastila shrinks. We become equal.
Especially when there's the romance with Bastila.
With Bastila.
Of course, for the video, it looked like she played as the female Revan. And so she wouldn't have had that romance option.
We become really closely tied to Bastila, in fact. By the end of the game, we can look back and see how much has changed. And the limitations of Taris in the early game is what enables that. Narratively, Taris makes an example of the narrative stakes. The destruction of the planet shows what the Sith are capable of, what's at stake for the protagonists and why they must act, because if they don't, many, many innocent people will suffer. Taris acts as a point of contrast that creates the illusion of a grand scope of the narrative. I have to admit, I get so into the world building of Taris that sometimes once that sequence is over, I just stop playing the game. I got so into this idea of my character as an underdog that when it came to learning to be a Jedi on Dantooine, I didn't even want to participate. I wanted an option to play the rest of the game without being a Jedi, and then without characters referring to you as a Jedi, and without people assuming that you're a fallen Jedi when you arrive on Korriban, and without people saying, "You're a Jedi, you have to do something, you're like the most important." Like, take it to Bastila. Like, I'm just some random person who...
There's actually so much merit in a game where you are just a nobody fighting alongside things, and a lot of RPGs make you someone important in the world. especially video game RPGs and that, where you don't get as many that keep you as the random nobody soldier and all that.
Wants to make a career out of swoop racing. I'm actually really terrible at swoop racing. I've never managed to successfully complete any swoop race tracks off of Taris. It's sad for me. There's a whole quest on Tatooine that I never managed to finish because one swoop racer guy was only going to talk to me if I posted a good time, and I never posted a good time. So good luck, dude. I'll see you in the next life, I guess.
Get good at it.
Anyway.
Come on, it's not that hard.
This has been my reasons for why I think Taris is secretly genius, although flawed. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate anyone who's given this channel a go. I'm having so much fun coming up with just weird things to say about video games. Thank you to anyone who's watched to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. And this has been A Loading Screen. I'm your host, Kiva, and until next time.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I'm not one of those that goes, you should skip things. I never understood that mentality. But yeah, I liked what she said about KotOR. It's interesting how they have barely any videos. But anyway. A lot of what she said was overthinking it, but also I love that she went into such detail for it, because that was a lot of valid points about why you shouldn't skip Taris. And yes, it sets up the whole rest of the game. Especially if you're on the first playthrough. It's like, why would you skip Taris? If you've played it a few times in a row and then you're going, yeah, okay, I know everything on Taris, maybe that's a bit more of a thing, but